Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. I guess it's named after me, Bill, but once again, my co-pilot, my very capable co-pilot, who has other things, other craft he has to fly most of the time, but occasionally jumps in the right seat with me, Bill Bender of TSN.com of the Sporting News. Welcome back to the Tim May Show, my man.
Hey, I hope your summer's going well, Tim. I know we're about a month and change out from Big Ten Media Day, but you're always keeping busy. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're taping this a little bit ahead of time because I'm going to be a volunteer again at the U.S. Open, this time at the Los Angeles Country Club this week, as you and I are being downloaded here, and I really look forward to that because I had a great time doing it last year. You just got back from an invention convention in Detroit where your daughter had a great invention, but of course, there's always somebody else coming along who has a better mousetrap, right?
No, Bella's done a fantastic job. It was our second year up at the Invention Convention Nationals. She's got a little bit of that streak of creativity in her that I don't have. So you appreciate a large Ohio delegation there. You would appreciate they did the OHIO as they took their pictures right there in the heart of Michigan, which is, Dearborn's fairly close to Ann Arbor, I guess the other way. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. She had a good experience. But, as I was up there, of course, I had to ditch for an hour and go write about this new Big Ten schedule and everything. And I'll kick it to you, Tim. But my initial read on the new Big Ten schedule was they're still protecting Ohio State and Michigan first, and then everybody else comes after that.
Yeah, I don't know what I'll be honest with you, my read is mixed, for a lot of reasons. But yeah, it does appear to be that way as you outlined it. But Bill, I'm not sure where we're going in all of this. I mean, are they going to reshuffle the schedule every 2 years? It looks like perhaps going in. That might be the initial take on this, so everybody can play in an opposing stadium at least once. That's 15 opposing stadiums at least once while they're in the Big Ten. I don't know why that's so important. It used to not be important at all that Ohio State got to play, players got to play at Minnesota or Michigan State or Northwestern or Nebraska. Now all of a sudden that's real important, which I don't buy. It's just another excuse for this round robin, no divisional schedule. But I thought the bigger takeaway, and yeah, it is what you're alluding to, is no divisions, which means number one and number two in the final Big Ten standings move on to the Big Ten championship game, which based on recent history, you got to figure is going to be Ohio State and Michigan, or Michigan and Ohio State, right? And right. And that does set up for this coming into this the 12-team college football playoff era, which ironically starts at exactly the same time in 2024. Sets the Big Ten up for having at least two members in that and possibly three. Agreed?
Yeah, I do. Well, when I say protect Ohio State and Michigan, it means this. It's the way you should do this schedule, in my opinion, would be you could protect three rivals, play 6 1 year, play 6 the next. And that's kind of the ideal 16-team schedule model. Now, with Ohio State, where you run into a problem is Ohio State being the draw that they are, the logical pairing would be Michigan, Penn State, USC, which that's tough to play those three schools every year. So I kind of understand what the Big Ten did there. And when I say USC and UCLA, you look at the numbers. I understand the Big Ten pulling them in. I think it's good in some ways. But 4 million people watched USC play UCLA last year. 17.2 million watched Michigan play Ohio State. So let's not get into any debate about what the big money game in the Big Ten is. The other missed opportunity, Tim, was perhaps they should have opened. If I was a Big Ten commissioner, I think the first game I would have scheduled for 2024 would have been Ohio State versus Michigan. That's the one they missed.
Yeah, and that keeps it from possibly being on back-to-back weekends. Number three, as I pointed out with Bo Bishop the other day on his show and other radio shows I did when this came out, you could have Michigan and Ohio State playing 3 times over a 5-week span. I mean, with the expanded college football playoff coming along, probably some shenanigans there where they wouldn't be matched up in that first round But in the second round, if one of them gets a bye, there's a good chance they could play 3 times in 4 games, which continues to diminish the importance of the one-time meeting, every year. And of course, that almost got diminished last year, but neither one of them could get out of the semifinals of the college football playoff.
Wait, did I say Ohio State, Michigan in week 1?
Yeah.
I better.
You meant
run
Ohio
that
State,
back.
USC.
I meant Ohio State, USC for
Oh, yeah.
starters, but I would understand what you just said. I still wouldn't understand it. I think their miss was Ohio State, USC in week 1 because you go all the way, and you were at those games in 09 and 10. The 2010 Ohio State, I think I put it in the article, Ohio State USC game was the most watched ESPN football game. It was 18-15, ugly game to be honest, but they would draw a lot of eyeballs. Now the Ohio State Michigan thing, I see it both ways. I could see them moving that off the last week of the regular season, despite the tradition, despite everything that comes of it, because of that opportunity that they may play in a Big Ten championship game, and they may play in a quarterfinal somewhere, who knows? But
Yeah.
I still want that game to carry the weight that it does. But I think fans of both sides, and we talked about this last year, and I talked about it with Urban Meyer last year, where I remember him just telling me, I don't know if I could handle it if we had to play them at the end of the regular season, then turn around and do it the next week, just because of the stress and the emotion and everything that both schools pour into that game.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And but then it diminishes that game, because let's face it, if Ohio State and Michigan are 1-2 going into that game, and they're quote both undefeated, end quote. I don't know why I put those in quotes. I just like putting quotes on stuff.
Quotes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then they're almost assured that they're both going to be in the Big Ten championship game. I would think at that point, good chance of that. So which weekend do you throw all your marbles into the middle of the floor? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Right.
There are all kinds of things that will diminish, will work toward diminishing the importance of the regular season matchup. And you know what? Maybe that's where we live in now, Bill. I'm 69 years old. I'm not that stuck on tradition, but I'm
Right.
I am bent on just throwing tradition out the rear window and acting like it doesn't matter for the newer, better thing, because tradition is what sets college football apart from the NFL, and now you're moving into basically the playoff era, the big time playoff era of college football, where in fact, the playoffs will start with conference championship games to a certain extent, at least for seeding and or inclusion in the college football playoff 12 division. So
Right.
there are all kinds of ways you can look at this. I just don't, I don't know how you can fix it. And personally, I didn't see any problem with having divisions again and playing 2 cross-divisional rivals each year, 9 teams total in the Big Ten, until you get things figured out down the road. Go ahead.
I would have done 2 divisions of 8, I think. I would have kept, so the divisions we have now, I think you put the easiest way to do it, if you and I were sitting there and telling the Big Ten how to run things, would have put USC and UCLA in the West and slide Purdue over to the East so they could play Indiana every year.
Yeah.
And it's not perfect, but you'd play 7 and 2. Now, here's the problem with USC and UCLA coming over, and it's the same problem but as I pointed out, if they have a complaint about not playing Ohio State and Michigan every year, they probably should talk to Penn State right about now. The Nittany Lions were a loser in the new Big Ten schedule. No protected rival, no guarantee. I think Bobby Carpenter, I saw him tweeted something to the effect of it'll be the first time that they haven't played Ohio State, right?
Since 93.
Yeah. And, same deal with Michigan. They don't get Michigan every year now. So that's kind of gives you a hint of how the Big Ten views Penn State. They had already done that with Nebraska, by the way, where Nebraska had joined the conference and they were infrequent against Ohio State and Michigan at that point. I think Ohio State, when's the last time they've been in Lincoln? A couple years, the Jackson Smith and Jigba 80-yard touchdown game, but they don't go there every year. So it still revolves around that. And the Big Ten schedule release show showed you that who was the first athletic director they brought on?
Yeah.
Gene Smith.
Yeah.
And Gene Smith was telling you. So you can't tell me he didn't have some influence on what was going on there.
Yeah. And like I said, this idea that they've got to play in every other stadium in the Big Ten at least once in their 4-year stay. Well, good luck with the 4-year stay part with people leaving early and or the transfer portal, but I digress. Is what does that have to do with anything about the Big Ten over the last 80 years? Nothing. So
Wait, you don't like that?
I do like it, but I
Okay.
don't think that's a good excuse for throwing away the divisions. I don't think
Okay.
that's a great excuse for that. And number two, like you just pointed out, Penn State, Ohio State should be a regularly scheduled huge TV inventory game, just like Ohio State, Michigan, because look at the numbers. Look at the numbers that game has drawn just forever, but especially over the last decade. It's crazy the TV numbers that thing has drawn, and the games, especially the games at Penn State that have been put on, have been drama filled, people sitting on the edge of their seats, etc. And now all of a sudden, that's just going to be a casual, every so often they're going to play Penn State. I mean, that's leaving. If I'm a TV network, I don't like that. I don't like the fact that I won't have a shot at having Penn State, Ohio State in my inventory several of those years. And that's that's kind of what you were alluding to, what I'm alluding to. But like you just pointed out, I think the best thing that could have come down, and Doug Maurice and I talked about this one time in the parking lot there at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Best thing could have come about was in 2024, the first week of the conference season. If that's in fact going to be the first conference games played, I would have had Ohio State hosting USC and Michigan playing at UCLA in a doubleheader of welcome to the Big Ten, kind of like welcome to the NFL. But wow, I think that would have been a box office draw on both ends of the United States of America.
I think they're going to do it in reverse, I bet you, because they haven't put the dates out.
Right.
So so that means Michigan will go out to USC, and UCLA, I believe they come to Ohio State in 2024 or vice versa.
No, I think Ohio State, Ohio State plays at UCLA in 2024. Isn't that right? Do I have that wrong?
Yeah, yes. And then they don't, UCLA's deal was they got both in the same season. They get Michigan and Ohio State, and then they don't get them. So I bet you Ohio State plays UCLA right off the bat, and USC plays Michigan. And it was fun. When I was looking that up, USC Michigan actually is the more frequent Rose Bowl matchup, but I don't think it carries nationally, or at least did carry nationally in the 70s and 80s, like a USC Ohio State Rose Bowl, because it's like the opportunity to do the Charles White, Archie Griffin, just roll the montage of those great games they played in the 70s and from there, I've always associated that as the most ideal. In Michigan, you can make the argument too, but those are the two that's the ultimate Rose Bowl matchup, right? If it's not Ohio State, it's Michigan. And it is a missed opportunity in that regard. Now, the other thing I was thinking, and you were talking about why they should have divisions. I kind of like that you get to go to each place once every 4 years. The weird part is like Iowa, for example, has 3 protected rivalries. And we, as Big Ten fans, we love our weird trophies. We love the Yellow Buck. We love the Paul Bunyan axe, the Paul Bunyan trophy. Part of me is like, I'm glad those are protected, but I would just prefer that if it sticks with 16 for a while, Tim, I'd rather them give Ohio State 3 protected rivals. And the ones that I would do, honestly, I would do Michigan, I would do Penn State, and I would throw them a bone like in Illinois, like somebody like that, to balance the schedule that way.
You know why you did that? You know why you did that though? And I don't even know if you stopped. I mean, Illinois used to be the last game on the schedule for Ohio State until the 1930s.
Right.
And Michigan moved there. Red Grange supposedly signed his pro football contract in the south end zone, or just south of the south end zone in Ohio Stadium way back when the NFL in its fledgling years was poaching as many as they could of big time star college football players. There's a lot of history in that regard, and it's been a forgotten, the Yellow Buck, etc. It's the ugliest trophy known to man. I'm not even sure it's a trophy. It's an enlarged trinket. But there's for example. But those are like, just wow, that cuts to the heart and soul of the Big Ten right there.
So then you balance out Ohio State, and this is what the SEC couldn't figure out, because they're still doing 8 games, which I hate. Now, had the SEC just with Nick Saban, who's a big part of this, let's be honest, Alabama drives that schedule too.
Yeah.
They could have said, we're doing a 9-game schedule. We're going to play Auburn every year. We're going to play pick one of LSU and Tennessee every year. The other one, this is the consequence of expansion, and then give them Ole Miss or Mississippi State. That
Yeah.
way you balance the schedules. Like Michigan, for example, I could see Ohio State, Michigan State, and I don't know, Minnesota, something like that. And
Yeah.
USC. Now, who feels that? USC and UCLA. But I still think there's opportunities for them to create rivalries with Nebraska. USC and Penn State, who knows? That could become a rivalry. That's what happens. But it's also the risk of one thing I'm curious about, Tim, and looking at the TV numbers, is how big of a draw is USC really? Like, it's an honest question because they had the nation's best player last year.
Yep.
They had some games that drew well, but they also ended up in the Cotton Bowl against Tulane.
Yeah.
So it's
because
not
they
like,
faltered. That's because of the Pac-12, and they faltered down the stretch. Go ahead.
but that's what I'm curious to see what they really draw versus. I know when Ohio State's on in prime time, it's going to be watched. I know when Michigan's on in any window, like Ohio State, that people are going to watch those two schools. I know they're going to watch Penn State probably third most. So I think I'm writing my own content here, maybe like looking what the average TV viewing for those three schools and really everybody else versus USC would be. Nebraska USC is probably close.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I'm just looking at modern times. Lincoln Riley's got that program on the rise. I think anybody could see that just based on their recruiting and the transfer portal and the success they've had there. And of course, they have the defending Heisman Trophy winner, probably gone in 2024, Caleb Williams. But still, it is, in my opinion, if there is a lighthouse on the West Coast for major college football, it isn't Oregon, it's USC. When USC gets its act back together. We also saw Alabama in between Gene Stallings and Nick Saban, lost its lighthouse, became very dim. Now it's back full beam. You see Georgia on the rise, but I think, boy, if you were ever going to go out and pluck one team from the West Coast, it would have been USC. And they have to have a tag team partner, bring along their little buddy UCLA. We'll see where that goes. But I'm looking forward to Chip Kelly matching wits with Ryan Day matching wits, or, Brian Hartline and Ryan Day matching wits with Lincoln Riley, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of intrigue for those two matchups, UCLA and USC with Ohio State. And so I think TV will really play it up big. And I think the big thing here, Bill, too, is, the Big Ten network affiliations. Kevin Warren's taking a lot of shots for heading out the door, leaving a lot of things in the back room not cleaned up in the palace there. But the getting 3 still over the air networks involved, I think was a huge deal still in this day and time where you still see cable or DirecTV or whomever haggling over rights fees for like ESPN or whomever for Peacock or whatever. I think that's a big deal that they are affiliated with those 3 still over the air networks, don't you?
Yeah, and primetime people are going to take their shots at some of the primetime games on NBC, but at the end of the day, they've got Notre Dame, Ohio State. I know this year they played Maryland and Charlotte in primetime, but I was telling people right off the bat, well, Alabama and Texas is that night, so that's their version of a punt.
Yeah,
it's fine because they've got Ohio State, Notre Dame. They've got some interesting games as we adjust to having November night games. I do think I had a long talk with my editor, who's an SEC guy. I was just explaining to him why we have reservations about night games, especially when you get into November, because I still believe that by the time they get November, whether they say it or not, Ohio State and Michigan are kind of gearing their calendar toward each other.
Yeah.
In some ways. And, there's a reason why they played in the same window that week before their game. Although last year, I'm trying to think if they did. Pretty sure they did last year. They were up. No, Michigan was first. They were at noon. Then Ohio State was at 3:30. But that matters because they want every hour of preparation to get ready for that game. So like you said, though, the TV's huge. The collections of coaches that the Big Ten is about to have is off the charts if you really think about it, right?
Yes.
Because of the addition of Matt Rule, because of the addition of Luke Fickell going to Wisconsin, all the way down to like a guy like PJ Fleck,
Yeah,
who, if you really think about it, wins 9 games a year at Minnesota.
and his bowl game.
And they win bowl games,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
there's not, I mean, I think we did our top 25 coaches for 2025, and I believe we had 7, and Chip Kelly was 26.
Wow.
So when half of your conference is a top 25 coach in the sport, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Bill Bender, TSN.com, of the Sporting News. Will Notre Dame be in the Big Ten within the next 10 years?
I'll let you answer second.
I
think
believe wholeheartedly Notre Dame will be in the Big Ten within the next 10 years, or Notre Dame will have made a huge, huge, huge mistake. Who their dance partner will be, I have basically said, if the ACC is going to fall apart or going to become a shadow of what it is, go out and get North Carolina, because they bring a lot to the table in terms of just being a prestige school, despite what happened there. Yeah, but a football program that's good and a basketball program that wants to be the best ever. You don't always get that, but I really like where they're going, big time state school. So I could see the Big Ten adding at least 2 more teams, possibly 4. I'm not as sold on you got to get Oregon and Washington as a lot of people are. What is your take on that?
Well, so if I was Big Ten commissioner, Tony Petitti, if I was considering an expansion plan, it would start with Notre Dame. You're right. They should be in the conference. The arguments I've had with some of my buddies, as you know, I'm a Catholic school kid, so I've been around a lot of Notre Dame fans. My argument for is always, think about these games, man. Think about how cool it would be to play Ohio State every year, how cool it would be. And I know some of the history behind that of like Era and Woody and the reasons they give for these teams not playing and the myths behind that. They should play every year.
Yeah.
And it would be fun. It would be fun to have them with Michigan State. So Notre Dame would be one I would get. If I wanted to add an ACC wing, so to speak, I would go get North Carolina. I would go get Miami. I would take that market. Yeah, I would go all the way down there. So I'm saying Virginia, North Carolina, Miami, and Notre Dame. That's 4. And if you want Duke instead of Virginia, that's fine too. So there's that wing. And then I think I would go west and get Oregon, Washington. Like you, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's conventional to add West Coast travel partners for USC and UCLA, especially when you look at what UCLA, where they're going to travel this year and how many miles they're going to log. And then if I'm going to do that, I might as well go all the way and either grab Stanford and Cal or Arizona and Arizona State, whichever 2 I like most. Now my conference is 24 teams. It's super huge. I might have to make 3 divisions of 8 and figure out some things, but I've got my NFL light, and then we'll see what the SEC does.
Are Washington and USC really travel partners? Isn't it like saying Florida State and Boston College are travel partners? I mean, you know what I mean? From a distance standpoint, I can understand, though, having the possibility of 3 of your 4 games, 3 of your 4 Big Ten games being on the West Coast, being a little bit of a convenience factor for USC and UCLA, which is that's what it would bring about, and not every road trip would be, although flying from USC to Nebraska or flying from USC to Washington might be a push, in terms of length. But I'm not sure, like you just pointed out, it would be maybe cool to see, but I'm not sure it is necessary.
Right.
And if I'm Oregon, for example, don't I want to get into the big, bad, and possibly more powerful, but maybe easier to reign Big 12 when all this settles out?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think the Big 12 has done a remarkable job of staying relevant after losing its 2 biggest brands. And I almost think, and you probably agree with me here, Tim, it's almost a case where the Oklahoma States and Kansas States were not necessarily sad to see Oklahoma and Texas go.
Yeah.
It's like, go be bigger than everybody else in the SEC. Good luck with that. That's what they're saying. Like, go have fun with that. Because I bet if you ask some Texas A&M people, they might want to go back and run the Big 12. So I think they've done a very good job of staying relevant. of being proactive with expansion. If they did grab Oregon and Washington and Colorado and the Arizonas, not a bad conference.
No, big
Also,
conference.
also playing to its strength with basketball. So
Yes.
we're almost to the point, depending on what happens with the ACC, where we may have an SEC, a Big 10, a Big 12. I think the Pac-12 is going to end up being like the old WAC that you and I used to watch, where it was late night TV, but other than BYU, not all that great.
Yeah.
And the ACC is a huge question, because if Notre Dame were to go to the Big 10 at any point, I think the ACC would be in big trouble.
Yeah, I agree. And the ACC could become almost the latter day version of the Big East. You know what I mean? With some really good basketball teams left, but football wise, yeah, Wake Forest, boy, they do a hell of a job. But you know, I mean, Duke sitting there. It'd be interesting because I opined recently that if the SEC was going to expand, go get Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech used to be in the SEC a long time ago,
Right.
you know, and go get Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech wants to be what Georgia and Alabama and name a football Tennessee are.
Right.
They want to be that. You know, they don't hide that fact. They're, you know, and so that would make sense to me. But yeah,
Florida State and Clemson, take them too.
Oh
Go
yeah,
do
no,
that.
those would be the first two you'd add, you know.
Right.
And yeah, I was making that a given because it makes so much sense in all kinds of ways. But you know, and if you go to Clemson or if you go to Starkville, Mississippi, you know, can you really tell the difference? I've been to both. I've been to both. I've been to both. They've both grown a little, but they're still out there, man. They're still out there.
But I think, you know, it's an interesting thing. The more after you said it, the more I'm thinking about it. What the Big Ten, if they have a West Coast strategy beyond USC and UCLA, do they want to have one, or is it just we got that LA market, we've secured that, we're good there. Miami is an interesting one to me though, and I know the reason why is it huge. What has the Big Ten's behavior been like in expansion? It's been about, whether it's, I don't know how much truth to it there is with the exposure, but they do go for the TV markets, right? They've gone for DC. They've gone for, what is the Rutgers TV market, Tim? You tell me.
It's when Ohio State's playing there, it's New York City and the New York metropolitan area, and probably when Michigan plays there. But otherwise, it's in Piscataway.
Right. You get Miami. I could see North Carolina. That's one that's been talked about enough.
Oh yeah.
And the academic reputation around UNC, and another, like, this is I've talked about this on 97.1 a little bit, just because I've become a lacrosse dad. I'm like, it's not a reason why, but it would be a bonus for the Big Ten to grab a North Carolina lacrosse program or a Notre Dame and add to what is becoming a more popular spring sport. Because let's be honest, the Big Ten doesn't show up in the College World Series much.
Yeah.
But they were a presence in the lacrosse Final Four. And I know that sport's going to continue to grow. You watch that happen over the next 10 years. I'm not saying it's going to overtake the other spring sports, but it's another fringe benefit for them to add. It's not the reason to add. By the way, North Carolina has a basketball program that the Big Ten might like as well.
Yeah. I mean, lacrosse, I agree with the lacrosse thing. Lacrosse has a chance of being one of those sports that pays for itself to a certain extent, you know, down the road, because all you got to do is run around Columbus and see everybody playing lacrosse, just like soccer, you know. I think they like the lacrosse better because it has more contact.
That new stadium at Ohio State's nice too.
Oh, heck yeah.
It's incredible. So those are things to consider. But as we know, every conversation revolves around football first. Is North Carolina enough of a football brand?
Yeah.
I mean, Mac's not going to be there forever, but
yeah, you're not going to get Clemson. I don't, you know, so that's off the table, in my opinion. In my opinion, who knows? Could happen tomorrow. The way these surprise announcements come about. But and I just think North Carolina has the, you know, I go back to Dick Crum days, and before that, you know, they've had good foot. I mean, Lawrence Taylor played football. You know what I mean? They've got some tradition. They've got some history to them. In my opinion, they made more sense than Maryland, you know, as a football power and really as a basketball school. So that's why they make sense to me. Plus, they're the biggest school in the state from the standpoint of prestige in that state, and that state's a very populated state. It's another decent road trip that you can get to, many of the Big Ten schools, et cetera. So, and like you just pointed out, lacrosse, right on down the line, there are all kinds of reasons there. And yeah, I think it would make sense, like you talk about a dance partner for Maryland. I don't think Maryland considers Rutgers a rival, but I would think Maryland considers North Carolina a rival from the
Huge.
good old days,
Well,
right?
I remember the day the Big Ten got Maryland, and I worked with a guy, I don't think he would mind me saying his name. So Sean Gentili, he Pittsburgh guy, went to Maryland, and he was just like stunned. And because he was going to miss those rivalries with Duke and North Carolina. And I would joke with Sean frequently. I would say, "Are you excited about that Wednesday night Iowa basketball game, that Wednesday night road trip to, Minnesota?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Can you even?" I was like quizzing him, having a blast with it. And Sean's a good sport. I was like, "Can you name Minnesota's arena?
Yeah.
Can you name Indy?" Well, he knew Indiana. Everybody knows Assembly
Yeah.
Hall. But to create those rivalries, yeah, it would be, you would grab more of that like kind of East Coast that the ACC already has. And I've heard Pitt get talked about. Pitt's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
would they do it? I don't know. I mean, I've heard West Virginia. I doubt it, because West Virginia has such a hard time. West Virginia wants to be. I think they're going to be fine in the Big 12, but they've openly flirted with the ACC in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. For some reason or other, those names never pop up as major candidates.
Right.
And, it's like the UN has its general counsel, that can veto anything. You just got the idea that maybe Penn State can veto Pitt. I mean, that's probably not even accurate, but I would think, based on the rancor that's sometimes been part of that rivalry, which has probably been more off the field than on the field, it might be a hard vote to get. Just like with West Virginia, for some reason, they never come up in a serious conversation. So we'll see. I mean, right now, travel convenience is totally out the window, though, right? I mean, that's why it makes sense for the West Coast to add partners for, or the Big Ten to add West Coast partners for USC and UCLA, is for all the other sports, to
Right.
give them at least a little bit of a break in that regard. But
Well,
heck, why not go? If you're going to do that, and the Oregon, Washington end up going to the Big 12, why not go to the Bay Area and add Stanford and Cal, because they're really good in almost everything but football right now, or at least Stanford is. Cal, I'm not sure what Cal is really good at. What's Cal really good at?
Yeah, that's and true. I think some of it's self-awareness. I talked about Texas and Oklahoma and schools thinking they're bigger than they are.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the self-awareness is Colorado going to the Big 12. That's the right weight class for them. I
Yeah.
think about a weight class for these schools.
Yes.
Oklahoma and Texas are SEC weight. They are. I don't know if
Yes.
they're SEC football.
But you're talking about so much more than football.
Right.
But you're talking about alumni base. You're talking about fervor.
Right.
Now Oklahoma State has great fervor, but it's not on the same tradition. What do you call it? Line or bracket as Oklahoma, even though they hate that. No, you're exactly right. I mean, there are reasons, like you said, find your own club of guys, you know what I mean? The club you fit in best with, and go for it and build it into something. And no, I don't know if you agree, Bill. I think Oklahoma and Texas, their fans, one of their fan groups, maybe not both, are going to regret moving to the SEC eventually. That's what I truly believe. It's great from a share the pie money wealth standpoint, but you're going to get your teeth kicked in occasionally. And is that going to sit well? Texas fans have kind of become accustomed to that, but of recent. But is that going to sit well with these alumni bases? I'm telling you, I grew up in Texas, man. It's going to be tough.
It is, and that's why they were such an interesting fit in the Big Ten for me over the years. Like it was. Oklahoma and Texas may have fit into that expansion plan a little bit better, because and it would have been perfect for the West. But there's that relationship with Nebraska that they have, because I was like, an ideal Big Ten West would be Nebraska, if we're just talking 8 teams, Nebraska, UCLA, just brands, Nebraska, Texas, Oklahoma, UCLA, USC, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Now I'm kicking out some traditional Big Ten schools there.
Yeah, but they can still
from a
play.
yeah, they can. I
Oh
don't
no,
know
wait,
how.
wait a minute. Yeah, that's what I've always argued too. If you were to form the Big Ten now compared to when it was formed, there would be members who wouldn't even get a
Right.
letter in the mail. You know
And
what I
then
mean?
my ideal Big Ten East would be Penn State, Michigan, Ohio. Well, I have to say Ohio State first. Obviously, I forgot to. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State,
Purdue.
and Purdue. And I'd
Yeah.
probably do Purdue, Indiana, Illinois, and then or I
North
say
Carolina.
no. Let me do that over again. Let's restart. So Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Notre Dame, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of like Purdue, Indiana, but you guys got to show us that for basketball. I'm keeping those two. So
Yeah.
I'm kicking schools out. People wouldn't be happy. There'd be some feelings hurt, but that's my way of saying the new college football that you and I are going to have to get used to is one where they're definitely going to have to, pull, like Gene Smith. You've heard him talk about pulling weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And or maybe, I mean, I've said this a million times, and it used to rankle Ohio State people, but I'm not sure it rankles them that much anymore. Some schools are worth more from a share of the wealth standpoint, which is what the ACC is going to, than other schools. You know what I mean? In the Big Ten, from the standpoint of, like you said, putting fannies in seats, whether it's in the stadium or on television. It'll be interesting to see if that might be the next shoe to drop in the Big Ten. Is like, well, these schools get a bigger share because they're drawing more interest, they're driving the TV interest bus. You know what I mean? So we'll see if they ever get to that aspect of it. But who knows? I just standing down this hill that Notre Dame will be in the Big Ten within 10 years. And the other team I would add for sure is North Carolina, and then see where everything falls. Hey, last question for you before I get you guys, because I don't get to have you co-pilot every week, and you and I miss kibitzing there in the airport before we get our shuttle to in the hotel before we get our shuttle to the airport with our crew. The surprise team, like a TCU, the surprise team nationally this year will be.
That's a good one. So Washington?
You can think for a second.
Would be Washington's my best answer, and I don't know how much of a surprise they are. If you paid it, obviously, Ohio State fans, Big Ten fans are super educated. So Washington did win 11 games last year. They've got an old Big Ten quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. He's really good when he's healthy, and he was really good with Kalen DeBoer last year. And their schedule's set up that they should be in November and have a pretty good team. I like where Washington's going. So I think they would be, I don't know, top 10 ranking really surprises people, but they're one that I've got my eye on. And I do this every summer so your listeners can laugh, but it's kind of getting sucked into the Texas hype a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the offense. I like Quinn Ewers. I'm kind of like, I mentioned this on 97.1 last week. What happens if they beat Alabama? Can you guys imagine?
Dude, I think that happens.
It could happen at the very minimum. And if it does, there are going to be a lot of takes out there by a lot of people.
You saw what Urban said on our Urban's take. He and I did at the end of spring. He thinks Texas has from top to bottom the most talented roster in the country. I mean, the deepest roster in the country. But of course, you can say that about a lot of things, but you still got to put it all together. Quinn Ewers was tearing Alabama up till he got hurt last year. Right. And that was just basically his second start, as a collegian. And I can see them going into Tuscaloosa and winning that game outright. And that's really going to flip the script across the nation and really flip the script on a lot of predictions. And Alabama will be wishing that 12-team deal was coming this year instead of next year.
Right.
But I digress. Alabama may just kick their butt too, but Alabama's problem, and I said this on one of the radio stations down there in Tuscaloosa recently, if you had me to tell you what's been Alabama's real problem over the last several years, they don't have that kick. Not that anybody can have a shutdown defense anymore, but they've really been lacking on big-time defense in their big-time games of people just carving them up, throwing the ball. And so we'll see where that goes. But, hey, Bill, I know you got to get going, man. I appreciate you doing the Tim May Show with me again. You're a great co-pilot. You even brought me coffee from the galley without me asking for it. Appreciate that. And I've got a Diet Dr. Pepper, but that's the way it goes. But anything else on your mind before we hang this one up?
We've got all kinds of off-season content at sportingnews.com. Obviously, we'll have bowl projections soon. And I know, being a somewhat frequent guest of your show, I enjoy the talk because, I'm right here in Central Ohio. It's close to home. I love talking Big Ten football. And we're going to have plenty of time to do that here very soon. So thanks so much. And if your listeners want to check us out at sportingnews.com, we'll be there.
And ladies and gentlemen, for Bill Bitter, this is Tim May. We'll see you next week.